Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Thought Leaders Live, where we talk with thought leaders in business, life, and all points in between. Today, we're talking with Nell 3D. That's Derick Debevoise Dewey. Hey, a leadership
Nailed it.
strategist, Forbes Senior Contributor, and the creator of the Lead in 3D framework. She helps high-performing leaders and teams do more good without doing more, which just sounds absolutely mind-blowing, by achieving well-being, performance, and purpose through the art of systematic subtraction. I can't wait to dig into that. Nell, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Greg. Really glad to be here.
How about you give us a little bit of background on yourself personally, your own personal journey, and then talk a little bit about your company or what you're doing as a keynote speaker, author, and entrepreneur in many ways.
Yes, absolutely. So I promise we won't go year by year, but I have to go back to when I was 12 because I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, for those of you who are New Englanders or know the area, which is, with love and respect, a city that is a bit down on its luck. It had a heyday, and these days, or back in the 80s when I grew up there, had a lot of problems of crime and poverty and under-resourcedness. So I went to an elementary school rather that was fabulous. Parents were really engaged. Teachers were amazing. Kids were kids. I walked there. There was a Mayfair. That it was a fabulous education. Kind of as a proud American, everything I hope that American schools can be for our population. And at 12, we all graduated to 7th grade, to middle school, and graduation was a big deal. White dresses and an art show, and it was very festive, because the school's leaders knew that that was statistically going to be the last graduation for about half of our class.
Wow.
So, lovely party, but a pretty tragic underbelly. And so my mom was a self-employed massage therapist, so didn't have a ton of cash, but she had the wherewithal and the social capital to know that 400 yards yonder, there was an arbitrary town line on the other side of which the schools were nationally award-winning. And so we moved. She and my stepfather scrambled together a mortgage, and over to West Hartford we went. And I experienced public school in a leafy suburb with ski bus on Wednesday afternoons and a jazz band that toured Europe every other summer, just insane opportunity. Whereas I watched my classmates in Hartford, do okay. They all came out all right, but literally grasping their lunch money in between classes in the hallways because crime was real in the hallways, in the parking lots, teenage pregnancy at 13. It was not the situation of enrichment and learning or, human flourishing that we would hope for our kids or for our future employees, right? As a business leader now. So anyway, I just share that, that was a really early, really visceral sense of like, I want to fix this. I was kind of a precocious, nerdy 12-year-old and 18-year-old, and maybe still am. And so it wasn't like a pity party, like, oh, these poor kids, but it was just like, this is suboptimal and I want to do something about fixing it. So that, my fabulous, well-funded public school launched me off to Harvard. And I knew that after that, I wasn't going to join my classmates in consulting or banking. Not that there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but because I was like, I got to fix this problem. It seems pretty big. I better start now. And so I spent 10 years in the nonprofit sector, really from teaching to leadership development to frontline service work, helping to build and run a community center in the West Bank of Palestine. And so I'll kind of cliffhanger it there for now, and you tell me what's helpful to get into next.
Well, then maybe take us on. I think you came back then from the nonprofit and started your own business.
Correct. Yeah. So I kind of had spent that decade like digging like a mole, like closer and closer and closer to impact, like a life that I could change. And I got there, right? I mean, the change we were seeing in that community was very real. And 4 years in, I was starting to professionally question my use there. I don't speak Arabic. I'm not a social worker, right? So I had hired a team and set it up, but was I really useful now? And then one morning, really pretty vividly, I woke up particularly unwilling to get out of bed. And I'd missed another Christmas at home. So it was that kind of winter lull. I had missed a bunch of friends' weddings because I didn't have the money or the time to fly back to the States. And I was just coming back from a trip home to Italy where my first husband and I lived. And that had blown up, that marriage. And so I was kind of preparing for divorce. And it was a few weeks after my dad's funeral in California, which I had not gone to.
Oh, you're breaking my heart here.
That is the correct feeling. That was the feeling. And so, obviously retrospect helps, and I've metabolized this all since, but what I know now I did was I pursued success one-dimensionally. And so for me, that one dimension was impact, right? I was just so driven to like change a life. But what about my own life? What about my own marriage? What about how I wanted to be as a daughter or a spouse? And frankly, from a professional point of view, I wasn't exposed to the learning that I wanted to be doing or delivering the value I could deliver based on my education and my language skill and my network. So anyway, I came back. I did an MBA program between New York and London and then settled in New York and saw the fascination and really the famine among my private sector classmates who were ruling the world, in my opinion, right? Google and the National Bank of Singapore and, blah, blah, all these influential positions. But they were like, wow, you like worked with like moms and kids and they felt better. Like, that's amazing. And again, I was like, yeah. And you know how, like, I served a few thousand, which is amazing. And I'm grateful. And we had, the work continues. But you know how many hundreds of thousands, millions of refugees there are to work with? I was not fixing the problem. So you have real budget and influence and a supply chain and reach and skills. Just sit tight. Don't quit and go off to work for the Peace Corps. Like, you don't know how to do Peace Corps. You know how to do corporate finance. Please stay there and do it in a way that does have that impact you're hungry for. And so for 10 years, I coached executives, MBA students, retiring professionals, thinking about what's next and that kind of legacy chapter. And what emerged from there, and then we can go where you like, was this notion of leading in 3D. And so the idea here is that to pursue goals simultaneously throughout our life and work for me, so my individual well-being, we, which is my team, my company, and the performance and profitability there, but also my personal we, my family, and third, the world in some bigger way, not saving the Amazon or curing cancer or ending racism single-handedly, because neither I nor you are good enough to do that, no matter how much we work, right? But some element of world. And when we do that in 3 dimensions, we can do more good without doing more.
Okay, I like that. I like that quite a bit. And I think that's probably a frustration so many people have. And I know I've had that in the past, where I remember vividly sitting at work, talking to my wife, who was at the time a 4th grade teacher, and I was in an ad agency as an ad copywriter. And I'm like, you've got the real job here. You are making a difference here. And I think I'd just written an ad for hemorrhoidal cream or something like that. So
I mean, hey, changing lives for sure. Ask the
yeah,
people who needed that cream.
yeah, yep. I definitely saved some people some pain, I'm sure, with my catchy headline.
Yeah.
But I totally hear what you're saying, and I like the balance between the three, especially. I think everybody thinks work-life balance, work and family, but I think that world aspect, especially these days, no matter what side of the political fence you're on, there's a lot of feeling of helplessness out there. Does that help if you kind of factor that into the equation?
It's really relevant and timely, Greg. I think, it's a simple human drive. Like, I have a very positive view of human nature. I am very convinced that very few people want to be, to burn more carbon than they need to on a given day, or to hold people down because of their age or hair color or religion. I'm not saying those things don't happen, because obviously we see really graphic and even violent versions of that. But that's not true self. apart from, I think it's 2% of humanity we figure are psychopaths and sociopaths. So that's not my target market. And, but 98% of us outweigh them. And so, and then evolution teaches us this, like evolutionary science, we have evolved to contribute to the greater good, right? Actually, this is a whole nother soapbox, but I'll just give people the thread that if you follow and read really carefully Darwin's writing, it's not survival of the fittest. It's actually about collaboration and cooperation that advanced the tribe back in the day and why we exist today. So I think there's a lot of myth around, especially in the US, right? The lone wolf, the independent warrior, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. No success story ever has been a one-person show. And so, it is a natural thing to want to leave the world a bit better, totally regardless of political or ideology. We want to make our grandkids proud. It's really that simple.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a common thread, even if it's not talked about enough these days. Let's get into the framework a little bit and some of these concepts that are associated with it.
Yeah.
The first one we have to get to, because the moment I read it, I was like, "Wait, what?" How to subtract systematically to focus on what truly matters. Could you explain that to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the systematic piece is really important. And sometimes you're like, God, you're such a nerd. And I am. That's okay. But it's not, it's actually really intuitive, right? Like we as individuals are systems. Like just we know that. We're born knowing that, right? We have a blood system and a bone system and a brain system. And there are like doctor words for those things. But we have a system in this body. And then we live in systems, right? We live in a family, we live in a community, we work in an organization. Like those are systems, to say nothing of our society or our world, or the natural system around us. And the problem is that we've been taught through school and at work and in our economy to work as factory, as in the industrial age of like input, output in this linear way. And so that's where like work-life balance, right? It's this duality of like this or this. But that's totally false. And we know that as humans in our bodies, that it's a system. There is work and there is life and there is me and there is we and there is a world. And that's an integrated system. And so even balance, I just wrote a post that we can share called Balance is Bullshit. And, obviously that's kind of a catchy headline, but I really do feel like that. If you've ever tried to keep the teeter-totter flat, it does not work, maybe for much more than that second before your friend slams down and, hopefully catches himself on the ground. And so the systematic piece is what's really important here, of not just saying it's a zero-sum game. Does my job give or does my life give? Because that's the only option. It's looking at the system and saying, well, I know that I'm a jerk if I don't eat breakfast. So can I maybe work out the drop-off schedule such that I get to have breakfast with my kids or my spouse? And now all of a sudden there's a little quality time there. Can I maybe choose a breakfast that is from a local brand or the farmer's market or a B Corp that makes the cereal that I like? Now, my body is fueled, right, from a nutrition point of view. I'm not a jerk at work, which my colleagues are very grateful for. I got a little time with my kids, maybe, even if it's screaming and I know breakfast can be intense, And I put my money toward my values of supporting a B Corp certified conscious company that's good for the world, or a local business that I know and love, or whatever it is, right? Or maybe I took 7 minutes to cook the eggs because I love cooking. It helps me zone out and ground. And I don't have time to meditate, but I can scramble some eggs. Right. So I can't tell you what yours is. Maybe people are like, breakfast? Are you kidding? Like, I'm not a breakfast person. I barely have time. The kids jump out of the car at 30 miles an hour. Good for you. Maybe your version is tea break or Sunday dinner or, a walk in the park. I don't know what it is for you. That's the point. I'm not prescriptive about this, but this system is figuring out the me, we world wins. And then the subtraction is anything that is one dimensional, right? Anything that you can't connect to these other dimensions and make meaning that serve more than one dimension probably isn't working as hard as you need it to.
Can we get an example of a one-dimensional thing?
Yeah. So I'll stick with a minute on the personal and then we'll get to work because I know that's where, leadership happens in some ways, although home is important too. So let's
Right.
say this is personal and I know a lot of friends who relate. There was a workout that really worked. It was really hard, pretty expensive class, and really unpleasant. Like the user experience was horrible. The teachers bark at you. The music is this like weird kind of gangster rap, which is just not my vibe. The studio doesn't have a welcoming, so there's nowhere to take your shoes off and get ready. Like it's a horrible user experience. And it was incredibly effective. Like I would see a difference in my core strength from doing it once or twice a week. So in preparation for my stepdaughter's wedding, I was doing it a fair amount, like maybe even 3 times some weeks, right? And I was spending kind of a lot of running through my credits, coming out a little cranky every time. And, the dress looked great. But after that, I was like, you know what? I retire from that. I am subtracting that from my life because it's not fun. I can't bring other people with me. It's kind of expensive. And I'd rather spend money on the apps of the individual creators who I really love, not a PE backed, chain. And so I'm done. And you know what? I still look great in a dress. And I love my workouts. And I'm proud to be paying my monthly fees to that business who I know is really values aligned, engaging, there's all kinds of details there. So that's a personal example. The professional story is from a client, which I love. And so I was working with a logistics company. Early-ish days of COVID, you can only imagine, right? They were absolutely insane and growing really quickly because they did their job well, which, by the way, was delivering medical and health supplies. So definite benefit, right? They weren't like delivering packs of cigarettes to Marine bases. They were trying to get health supplies around the world. Great. Very complicated. So I'm working with the leadership team, and one of the direct reports got a long-awaited opportunity to become a people manager, right? This guy had been an awesome individual contributor, very smart, very whatever, but had never managed a team, was keen to do it. And so with the growth, that opportunity came. And so he's like, yes, like I'm going to apply all the HBR, everything that I've been reading for decades and all the bad bosses and the good bosses. And we're going to have weekly one-on-ones, and I'm going to provide guidance and articles for them to read after in a podcast like that. And I think it may be 6 weeks, let's call it, into this role. So a little bit, but pretty early days. He's putting his half custody and he's putting his daughter to bed on Thursday night. And she looks up at him, and he's like, "Good night, sweetie." And she's like, "Dad, when do we get to make dinner again?"
Hmm. Oh.
And so he's like, "Oh, talk about heartbreak."
Right.
And so he is up all night. Like, what do I give up? Balance. Do I give up dinner with my kid? Because, maybe we can do that when she's 14, or maybe we can do one night a week, every other week, or do I give up people management? I'm a dad. And so I can't manage people. It's too much extra work. So he's up all night spinning and he called, he sends his coach an email. "Can we chat?" And over the course of the day, he had heard this workshop that we had done ages ago, a few months before this on leading in 3D. And he's like, it's a false choice. It's not about balance. And so what if the one-on-ones were every other week? And what if I walked and talked during them? Because I've also given up my workouts, right? The treadmill can't talk back like my daughter did, but I've not been on the treadmill in weeks. So I could do walk and talks. We can walk. Hopefully my direct report will also do that. So they get some fitness and I model that. And I save 3 hours a week, right, for these 3 people. I don't need to provide them. I shouldn't provide them with articles and podcasts. Like they're intelligent humans. They know how they learn. They know what they like. I don't need to take that on. That saves me another 3 hours because I was spending the hour, right? And so 6 hours, 2 hours is more than enough to make and eat dinner 3 nights a week. And maybe we'll keep doing a little takeout because it's become a fun ritual, right? So I've saved 6 hours, added walking, put 4 back into cooking, kept 2 for whatever else I might need to do as a manager. Right. And so that's the end. By the way, I'm modeling to my daughter a balanced lifestyle. I'm modeling to my team an engaged dad who has boundaries and who walks while we're talking to get the step count up. Yeah. So again, simple stuff. Obviously, people that we're working with are dealing with more complex things, and that's great. But just these baseline hygiene factors, the win-win-wins that you find once you think systematically are magical. And so it's really not too good to be true that we're doing more good without doing more.
So that's what I think the point of the fulfillment and the success go hand in hand when you lead in 3D. Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's fulfillment, right? Because of some connection on that world level. Again, not grandiose. I am not Mother Teresa, nor are you. You have a job to maintain. So please do that. But some connection, again, the buying local, modeling health, whatever those pieces are, is the fulfillment that comes. The success and the performance is efficiency and empathy and human connection at work. And you miss the third benefit, which is well-being, right? So it's me, well-being, we, performance and success, and fulfillment world. That's the triple crown that we get here. And so, yeah, those are the win-win-wins that I just love to see.
And I'm curious, do you prioritize one over
Mm.
out of the three?
Which matters most?
Which one matters most? And the reason why I bring that up is because I talk with my wife, who is a parent coach, and she's always like, look, we have to get you right as a parent first with yourself before you can parent effectively. And they say the same thing about caregivers too. You have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of others. Does this apply to what
Yes.
you're doing as well?
Your wife is right, and that is my best leadership lesson
She
of the day.
always
Everyone
is.
should go home with that. That is just the slogan. Forget about leading in 3D. Your wife is right. But absolutely 1,000%. I mean, it is a system. And so if you think of it as a three-legged stool, if you try to make it two legs, it's not pretty. And if you try to make it one, it's a unicycle, right? So I will not give up the holy trinity of leading in 3D. And we talk about the oxygen mask on every plane flight for a reason. It is
Yeah.
just simply true,
Yeah.
right? So you do not need to be perfect. There are moments when you will be tired. There are moments when you will feel lonely and not connected to friends. There are moments when you will be spiritually maybe a little bit adrift, or it's not all always going to be perfect, but you do need to have it. A metaphor that I love that maybe is helpful is, we're juggling, right? Again, we're not balancing, we're juggling.
Ah,
But you need to recognize the difference between plastic balls, which will bounce if they fall, and glass balls, which will shatter.
oh, that's good.
Yeah, and me is a glass ball. You
Yeah,
can't let yourself get too far gone.
that's really good. We have to get to this point because you mentioned this to me earlier, and when I read the description, you lead retreats with horses. Tell us about what horse wisdom reveals about influence and authentic leadership.
Mm. So hopefully I've given you some specific stuff to play with, but there's a really specific method for systematic subtraction, and it is stop, drop, and roll. And so if you're my ish generation, that might sound like fire safety, right? Something's
Right?
burning. You're like, stop, drop, roll around, smother the flames. Great, good life lesson. But in this case, the stop, drop, and roll is stop and get present. Drop is the subtract, and then roll is the win-win-wins, right? Connect the dots. And horses, 56 million years later, not because they have taken my class, but because they have evolved as one of the most successful mammals on the planet through all of evolution, have learned this. And so their version of stop is robust presence. If you've ever hung out with a horse or frankly a dog, right? Like they are in the moment. They're not worried about groceries. They're not worried about quarterly earnings. They're not worried about how they look dumb in the meeting this morning. They are right there in the moment. But they are in the moment. They're not a monk on the hill meditating, right? Which I think is sometimes what we go to these days with the kind of mindfulness industrial complex.
Yeah.
It's like, false. I mean, look, there's a benefit to that. And I'm a meditator and it makes a big difference to me. And so, nothing wrong with that. But the stop that I encourage and that I need people to do this subtraction well is robustly present. So it's aware of your colleague's mood. It's aware of your kids' developmental stage and whether they want to cook dinner with you at 14 or 9. Like it is connected to what's happening around you. And then you can start to analyze what's working, what's not, the one dimension versus the two versus the three. And horses do that. That's how they live. That's how they show up, because they need to survive as prey animals, right? So if they're not in touch with the weather changes, the herd dynamics, where the food source is, they die. It's not, again, it's not a strategic choice they're making. Drop is maybe where they shine the most, and it's about energy conservation. They are prey animals. So anything that they do, a step toward food, a snap of the head to bite a herd mate who's trying to take their food, whatever it might be, is a step less they can take away from prey. And so again, they're literally more likely to die. And so when you watch horses communicate, when you know how a herd works, you'll see that if somebody's encroaching on my hay, I will flick an ear, right? They're 1,200-pound animals, and they just do this.
Oh.
8 times out of 10, that's enough. The other horse is robustly present, sees and feels that message, and is like, got it, buddy. Sorry, I'll go back to my pile. All good. And the 2 times out of 10 that the horse is a little aggressive maybe and doesn't take the hint, they might move their head and kind of gesture as though to bite. But they won't bite. They won't make an attack. It's just that. And 9.8 times out of 10, that's more than enough. And the other horse takes off. And then very occasionally you'll see an actual bite or a kick or a thing, right? But it's very rare. And so imagine if we led that way and we said, hey, Greg, that big client meeting is coming up. Do you have all the materials we talked about, or do you need any help? Rather than, Greg, the meeting's next Tuesday. You have the thing, right? You know that client is really tough and this really matters for our quarterly goals. So I'm sure is it 28 pages, the PowerPoint? Have you proof? Like A or B? How do you want to be managed or lead? Right? So it's this notion of the least possible effort for the desired impact.
I like that. I think I might try that with my wife when we share cheesecake. I see if I can move my ear to get her to ward her off.
Cheesecake is a different thing than hay. If it's good cheesecake, Greg, you got to go right to loud.
I like it. Okay. Well,
and the third little piece, sorry,
Yeah,
I get so excited about too, but let me complete it for people so they have everything, is congruence. And this is the role and the alignment piece. And the really fun, magical horse story, which I'll do briefly, is that horses and mountain lions exist in the same ecosystem, right? They are a predator-prey pair. And so by definition, they live in the same spot. But if a horse was always like, oh, there's a mountain lion, they would be neurotic and waste their energy, because mountain lions are always around. So what they have evolved to understand is when a mountain lion is hanging out and getting water or caring for its young versus when it is incongruent, it is lying, it's pretending not to be there so that it can hunt and attack.
Huh.
And so again, not strategically, not through enlightenment, but as an evolutionary tactic, horses can sense incongruousness or inauthenticity. And so that's the lesson around the role, is that workout that I was doing was inauthentic. I hated it. It was miserable. Yes, it had some effect on my core muscle development, but it was a mess. And so I had to drop that, right? Because it was not congruent. It was not aligned.
Wow. So I'm assuming people give off that kind of, inauthentic aura or, radio waves of some sort, and other people can sense that and react to that.
Yeah.
And
It's physics, right? I mean, it's energy waves, and
yeah,
it's biological, right? We can measure that with sensors. And so, again, we as humans, and there's mirror neurons. There's all kinds of physiological backing to this. It's not like woo, I feel your vibes. It's a very chemical process that we can tell emotion on that physical level, and then sense if it's incongruous with what you're saying.
it's interesting. We walk our dog and he'll go after other dogs if they look at all threatening to him. He's a little Chihuahua. But when we walk past a dog that has an invisible fence, he walks right by him. He doesn't
Amazing.
react to them. And I think we're trying to figure this out, but I think you might have just answered it for us.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, this was fantastic. We're coming up on the hour now. Tell us if someone wants to learn more about you, your keynote speaking, your retreats, workshops, go whisper with the horses, whatever, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my writing is all on Substack, and we'll include the link. It's called Subtract to Succeed. And so, a weekly post of these examples and frameworks and tools, and then notes through the week. LinkedIn, thanks to my multisyllabic name, I'm very easy to find and very engaged there. And so, that's a slightly more kind of technical platform of where I'm speaking, what I'm up to, and very receptive to DMs there as well if people are interested. So those are two good channels. And yes, there's a retreat in Santa Fe in April. So follow up on either channel and I'll find you.
Ooh, Santa Fe. I'd love to get there at some point. Well, thank you for joining us, Nell, and thanks everyone for tuning in to Thought Leaders Live.
Thanks so much, Greg. Great to be with you.